The lecture hall was a giant half-circle, built to impress. Its walls were made of a clear material, giving everyone a perfect view of space. The big, red planet Mars hung in the blackness outside, a silent giant watching them. Inside, the air was cool and still. Rows of seats went down towards a stage where a hologram of the Milky Way galaxy glowed softly. Instructor Park stood before the hologram. He was a man who looked like he was carved from stone. His back was always straight, his uniform always perfect, and his hair was cut short and was gray at the sides. He moved with a sharp, military precision. "Today, we continue with galactic integration protocols," Park said. His voice was flat and clear, reaching every corner of the quiet room. "This is essential history. It explains how we, as a species, found our rightful place in a civilized galaxy." He pressed a control in his hand. The hologram zoomed in. The countless stars blurred, and then one small, yellow star came into focus. A single, blue and white planet circled it. A label appeared next to it in simple, block letters, Earth. Point of origin Class 2 development. A soft murmur went through the cadets. For many of them, Earth was just a picture in a history file. A place of stories, not a real home. Park gestured to the image. Earth, humanity's cradle. A world of great potential, but also of great struggle. He said the last word carefully, as if it were something dirty. It was a planet pushed to its limits. Its resources were nearly gone. Its climate was broken. The people fought constant wars over the little that was left. They were a species on the edge of disappearing forever. In the middle rows of the hall, a young man named Gene sat listening. His hands were clenched into fists on his desk. He was trying to keep his face calm, but a small muscle in his jaw kept twitching. He had heard this lesson before in different ways. It always felt like a slow, constant drip of poison. Next to him, a young woman named Hannah was perfectly still. Her eyes were fixed on the hologram of Earth. She did not blink much. Her face showed no emotion at all. She was like a deep, quiet lake on a windless day. "This period of chaos," Instructor Park continued, "is what we call the pre-Exodus era. It was a dark time, but it was also the time when a few brave visionaries looked to the stars. They built the first generation ships. These were slow, fragile arcs carrying the last hope of our kind away from a dying world." The hologram changed. It showed crude, bulky ships leaving Earth's orbit. Then the image fast-forwarded. It showed these ships being found by sleek, silver vessels marked with the symbol of the galactic core. The scene was clearly designed to show a rescue. "The galactic core found our generation ships," Park said, a note of pride finally entering his voice. "They saw our potential buried under our primitive ways. They gave us technology. They gave us medicine. They showed us how to build stable societies on new worlds. They taught us efficiency, order, and peace. Because of their guidance, we have left our violent and wasteful past behind. We have evolved." Gene shifted in his seat. He leaned a little closer to Hannah and whispered, his voice tight. "He makes it sound like we were helpless children, like we didn't do anything for ourselves." Hannah did not turn her head. Her eyes stayed on the hologram, which now showed a map of the galaxy, dotted with bright, prosperous-looking human colonies. "He is telling the story the way the core wants it told," she replied, her voice so quiet it was almost a breath. "Just listen." But then another voice cut through the quiet, from a few rows behind them. It was a girl's voice, light and mocking. "Can you even imagine?" the voice said. "Being born there? On that old rock?" Gene and Hannah both knew the voice. It was Micha. She was a cadet from New Tegu, one of the oldest and richest core world colonies. She was pretty, with sharp eyes, and she always acted like she was better than everyone else. Micha was talking to the two cadets sitting next to her. "I saw a documentary," she went on, not even trying to whisper now. "The gravity is so strong it makes your bones heavy. The air is full of toxins left over from the old wars. No wonder the people from there are so behind. It must affect their development." Jin's face went hot with anger. He started to turn around, but Hannah's hand moved faster than he could see. She placed her fingers gently on his arm. It was not a tight grip, but it was firm. It was a clear message. Stop. Do not. He looked at her. Her face was still calm, but her eyes had changed. They were harder now, like dark stones. She gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of her head. On the stage, Instructor Park had heard the comment. He paused his lecture and looked towards Micha's group. For a moment, Jean felt a spark of hope. Surely the instructor would correct her. He would tell her such talk was disrespectful and against the rules. Park's mouth became a thin, hard line. Cadet Micha, he said. Personal commentary is not required. That was all. No reprimand. No punishment. He simply turned back to the hologram as if she had just coughed. The message was clear. Her words might be rude, but the idea behind them was not entirely wrong. This, Park said, pointing back to the Class 2 development label next to Earth, is why we study these protocols. To understand where we came from so we can appreciate where we are. The core did not just save us from a dying planet. They saved us from ourselves. They saved us from our own Earthborn nature. The word Earthborn hung in the air. In Park's mouth, it did not sound like a simple fact of birth. It sounded like a flaw, a stain. Jean felt a sickness in his stomach. He looked down at his own hands. He was Earthborn just like Hannah. They were two of only a handful in the entire academy. They had worked so hard to get here to prove they belonged. But in this room, listening to this lesson, he felt like he was being erased. His home, his history, his very identity was being called a mistake. He glanced at Hannah again. She had finally looked away from the hologram. Her gaze was now fixed on the back of Instructor Park's head. Her expression was still unreadable, but there was a new intensity in her stillness. She was not angry like Jean. She was something else. She was focused, like a hunter watching its prey. She was listening, and she was remembering every single word. The quiet of the lecture hall was replaced by the bright lights and hard surfaces of the physical training deck. The air hummed with the low power of energy fields and the soft thuds of practice. The cadets stood at attention in their gray training uniforms, forming neat lines on the polished floor. Instructor Park stood before them, his hands behind his back. His eyes moved over the group, judging them. History is important, he began, but theory is useless without application. The strength and discipline of the core are not just in our minds. They are in our bodies. They are in the way we move, the way we fight. He walked over to a tall training dummy. It was a simple human-shaped post, made of a dense, flexible material designed to absorb hits. Today, you will learn the Kalen takedown, Park announced. It is a standard maneuver for shipboard security and personal defense. It was developed by core combat scientists. It is the most efficient way to disable a larger opponent without killing them. He moved into a starting position. His body was relaxed but ready. Watch closely. Efficiency of motion is everything. Waste no energy. The core way is about control, not brute force. In a movement almost too fast to see, Park spun on one foot. His other leg swept out in a high, perfect arc. His heels struck the side of the training dummy's head with a sharp, clean thwack. The dummy wobbled violently on its base. The move was smooth, graceful, and deadly. Control the center line. Unbalance your opponent. Strike with precision, he said, his voice calm as if he had just taken a slow walk. He turned back to the cadets. This technique represents our philosophy. Maximum effect, minimum effort, a necessity our ancestors on overstrained Earth, with their brawling and their wasteful use of energy, never truly mastered. Jean, standing in the front row, felt his face grow warm. The insult was not even hidden. It was just part of the lesson. He glanced at Hannah, who stood a few people away from him. Her face was, as always, a mask of calm attention. Instructor Park's eyes scanned the line of cadets. They stopped on Micha. A small, approving smile touched his lips. Cadet Micha. Please demonstrate. Micha stepped forward, her chin held high. She took her position in front of a dummy. She took a deep breath and then moved. Her form was a perfect copy of Park's. The spin, the kick, the strike. It was all very clean and correct. The dummy shook from the impact. She landed smoothly and looked at the instructor, a proud look on her face. "Excellent, cadet," Park said, nodding. "Precision and control. That is the core standard." Micha walked back to her place, smirking at the cadets next to her. Park's eyes moved again. This time, they landed squarely on Hannah. "Cadet Hannah, your turn." A quiet tension filled the room. All the cadets knew Micha's comments from the lecture. They knew Hannah was from Earth. This was more than a simple test. It was a statement. Hannah walked forward without a word. She did not look at Park or at the other cadets. She only looked at the training dummy. She stood in front of it, her posture different from Park's or Micha's. She was not relaxed. She was coiled like a spring. She did not take a deep, showy breath. She was just still. Then she moved. It was not the same. It was faster, sharper. There was no graceful spin. There was a short, brutal pivot. Her leg did not sweep in a high arc. It shot straight out, a piston of motion, and slammed into the dummy's head. The sound was not a clean thwack. It was a deeper, heavier crack. The dummy, designed to wobble, was thrown back so hard its base lifted off the floor for a second before it slammed back down, vibrating violently. The room was completely silent. Hannah lowered her leg and stood normally again, her expression unchanged. Instructor Park stared at her. His face was dark. He walked over to the dummy and touched the spot where her heel had struck. The dense material was slightly cracked. "Adequate power," he said, his voice cold and hard. "But your form is brutish. You are not following the technique. You are relying on muscle memory from whatever brawling they teach you on Earth." He said the word brawling like it was a disease. "You must unlearn these bad habits. The core technique is superior in every way. It is a system. Your way is just chaos." He turned his back on her, addressing the whole group again. "This is a prime example of the challenge Earthborns face. They are shackled by their planet's legacy. They think with their muscles, not their minds. They believe raw force is the answer. This is why the core's guidance is so important. We provide the structure they lack." Jean felt a hot ball of anger form in his chest. He saw the look on Micha's face, a look of pure satisfaction. He saw the other cadets glancing at each other, some of them nodding as if Park's words made perfect sense. Hannah had just performed a move with more raw power than any of them could ever manage, and she was being scolded for it. Hannah herself did not react. She simply walked back to her place in the line. She did not look ashamed or angry. She just looked like she was filing the information away. Her eyes met Jin's for a brief second, and in them he saw no frustration. He saw a deep, endless patience. It was the patience of a mountain. It was the patience of the earth itself, enduring countless storms without changing its nature. She had shown them a glimpse of her truth, and they had called it a flaw. She did not argue. She just waited. The silence in the training deck was heavy and uncomfortable after Instructor Park's words. The cadets stood perfectly still, but their eyes were moving. They glanced at Hannah, then at Park, then at each other. The air felt thick with things that were not being said. Jean could not stand it anymore. The heat in his chest from the lecture hall had grown into a fire. He saw the calm on Hannah's face, and it made him even angrier. Why did she just take it? Why didn't she defend herself? He took a step forward, breaking the straight line of cadets. "Sir," Jean said, his voice louder than he meant it to be. It echoed in the quiet room. "With all due respect." Instructor Park turned around slowly. His face was like stone. He did not like being interrupted. "That is enough, Cadet Jean," he snapped. His words were like a whip. "You will return to your position." But Jean was too upset to stop. "You are not being fair, sir." Hannah's takedown was powerful. It worked. Why does it matter if it wasn't exactly the core way? It was better than just adequate. Park took a slow step toward Jean. He did not look angry in a hot way. He looked cold, which was much worse. "Your emotional defensiveness," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "is another Earthborn trait we are trying to help you overcome. Your inability to control your feelings proves my point. You let sentiment cloud your judgment. The core way is about logic. Control. You have neither. Jean felt his face burn with shame and rage. He wanted to argue, but the words stuck in his throat. The instructor had made him into an example, and he had walked right into it. It was then that Micha decided to speak. She let out a short, sharp laugh. The sound was like glass breaking. All heads turned to her. He's right, Jean, she said, shaking her head with a fake look of pity. You should be grateful we are even letting you try to catch up. Everyone knows the facts. She looked around at the other cadets, inviting them to agree with her. The genetic scans don't lie. Everyone has seen the data. People from Earth are just built differently. And not in a good way. The gravity, the old radiation, it left a mark. They are physically and intellectually inferior. It's a simple fact of biology. The words hung in the air, ugly and direct. This was no longer a lesson or a criticism of technique. This was a personal attack. It was against the Academy's strict rules about respect and dignity. Jean stared at her, his hands clenched into fists so tight his nails dug into his palms. Instructor Park did not yell at Micha. He did not give her a punishment. He simply sighed a long, tired sigh. He looked like a man who had to deal with childish nonsense instead of cadets. Cadet Micha, he said, his tone weary. That comment was uncalled for. It was disrespectful. He paused, and in that pause, Jean felt a tiny flicker of hope. But then Park continued. However, he said, the underlying point about the documented physiological and cognitive differences between core world humans and Earthborn humans. That is a part of the official core curriculum for a reason. The data exists. We cannot ignore science, even when it is unpleasant. The hope in Jin's chest died. The instructor had not supported Micha, but he had supported her meaning. He had made her ugly insult sound like a simple, unfortunate scientific fact. Jean felt completely alone. He looked at the other cadets. Some were looking at the floor, ashamed. Others were nodding slowly, believing the authority of their teacher. No one would speak up. No one except Hannah. While everyone was looking at Park or Micha or Jean, Hannah had been perfectly still. But something had changed. The deep, endless patience in her eyes was gone. It had been replaced by something clear and hard, like ice. She had listened to Micha's cruelty. She had listened to Jin's brave but foolish defense. She had listened to Instructor Park use his authority to agree with the insult. She watched as the story of her home and her people was twisted into a lie about weakness and stupidity. She was done listening. She did not look angry. Her face was still calm. But her calm was now the calm of a soldier before a battle. It was a decision. She slowly turned her head and looked past Jean, past the other cadets. Her eyes were fixed on a device on the far wall of the training deck. It was a large white panel with a glowing blue handprint on it. It was a medical-grade bioscanner used for deep physical analysis and injury assessment. Without a word, Hannah stepped out of the line. She did not walk quickly or slowly. She walked with purpose. Every eye in the room followed her. The silence was so complete that they could hear the soft sound of her boots on the floor. Instructor Park watched her, his brow furrowed in confusion. Cadet Hannah? Return to formation. The lesson is not over. Hannah did not stop. She did not even look at him. She walked directly to the scanner. She stood in front of it, her back straight. The blue light from the handprint lit her face. Instructor, she said, her voice quiet but clear. It was not a request. It was a statement. I invoke my right to a public physiological scan. I will use it to refute a slanderous claim made against my point of origin. The room seemed to get even quieter, if that was possible. No one moved. No one breathed. They all just watched the quiet Earthborn girl standing before the machine, ready to prove them all wrong. Instructor Park stared at Hannah. For a few seconds, he was too surprised to speak. His mind tried to understand what she was doing. A public scan? It was a dramatic, unnecessary act. He finally found his voice, which was tight with annoyance. Cadet Hannah, this is a waste of time. he said, walking toward her. Return to the line. This childish display is exactly the kind of emotional behavior I was talking about. Hannah did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the scanner's screen. It will only take a moment, she replied. Her voice was flat. It held no emotion, no fear, no anger. It was just a fact. Before Park could take another step or give another order, Hannah lifted her right hand. She placed her palm flat against the glowing blue panel on the wall. The scanner came to life with a low hum. A ring of white light circled the panel, moving up and down her hand. Beams of light swept over her entire body from head to toe. On the large screen above the scanner, numbers and graphs began to appear. They moved too fast to read, a rushing river of biological data. The cadets watched, mesmerized. No one had ever used the scanner like this. It was for broken bones and torn muscles, not for proving a point. Instructor Park stopped walking. He crossed his arms over his chest. A smug, confident look was on his face. Fine. Let's see it. Let's see the data that proves the slight physical disadvantages of the Earthborn baseline. It will be a good lesson for everyone. He was sure the machine would support him. The core science always did. The first number to stabilize on the screen was bone density. The average for a core world female of Hannah's age and size was 1.21 g/cm, superscript 3. The number next to Hannah's name flashed and settled. 2.18 g/cm, superscript 3. A soft murmur went through the cadets. That wasn't a slight disadvantage. It was almost double. Next was muscle myofiber density. The average was 5,200 fibers per square centimeter. Hannah's number flashed. 9,850 to. The murmuring grew louder. Gene felt his heart start to beat faster. He looked from the screen to Hannah's calm back. What was he seeing? Neural synapse conduction speed. Average, 120 meters per second. Hannah, 195 m/s. Metabolic basal rate. Average 1.4. Hannah, 2.8. Tendon tensile strength. Average, 80 MPa. Hannah, 155 MPa. With every new number, the room grew more tense. This was not the profile of an inferior being. This was something else entirely. This was a profile of someone who was, by every physical measure, more durable, more powerful, faster, stronger. Instructor Park's smug look had vanished. He was now staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. His eyes were wide with disbelief. This is not possible, he whispered. The scanner must be malfunctioning. But the scanner was not done. At the bottom of the screen, a final analysis was processing. The words blinked once, twice, and then stayed. Genetic origin. Earthborn. Physiological assessment. Augmented. Threat potential. High. The word augmented glowed red on the screen. For a full 3 seconds, there was absolute silence as everyone read the word and understood its meaning. Then, the scanner's calm, synthetic AI voice spoke out loud, confirming what was written. Subject, Hannah. Designation, human. Genetic origin, Earthborn. Physiological assessment, augmented. Threat potential, high. The word augmented echoed in the silent room. Then, chaos broke out. Augmented? A cadet whispered, his voice shaking. From the genetic wars? Said another. Taking a step back, Micha's face was white with shock and fear. She looked at Hannah as if she were a monster. Instructor Park's shock turned into pure, hot rage. His face went from pale to a dark red. The truth was not that Hannah was inferior. The truth was that she was something the galaxy feared. Something from the old, dark stories of Earth. A forbidden creation. A forbidden augmentation, he roared, his voice cracking with fury. All his control was gone. An Earth-born abomination. You are not just primitive. You are a weapon. A crime. He lost all sense of being an instructor. He saw only a thing that should not exist. He lunged at her. His body moved into the most powerful attack he knew. It was the same Kalen takedown he had taught them, but now it was not for practice. It was for real. He spun, his leg rising in a perfect, high-velocity kick aimed directly at Hannah's head. He meant to knock her out, to take down the threat. To the other cadets, it was a blur of motion. It was the end of the fight. The instructor was going to win. But to Hannah, the world had slowed down. She saw the minute tightening of the muscles in his shoulder before he moved. She saw the shift of his weight onto his back foot. She saw the beginning of the spin. She had all the time in the world to react. She did not move to block the kick. She did not duck. She did not step away as his foot swept toward her temple. Her hand moved. It was not a wild swing. It was a precise, calm motion. Her palm snapped up and met his ankle in midair. There was a sharp, shocking thwack of impact. The kick stopped dead. Hannah stood perfectly still. Her arm was firm, not even trembling from the force of the blow. She held Instructor Park's leg there, his ankle locked in her grip. He was frozen in an awkward, unbalanced pose, held up only by her strength. The look on his face was one of pure, utter shock. His confidence, his authority, his whole understanding of the world was shattered in that single moment. Hannah looked at him, her eyes cold and clear. She had their complete attention now. Instructor Park was trapped. He could not move. He could not pull his leg free. Her grip was like solid metal. He stared into Hannah's eyes, and for the first time, he felt true fear. This was not a cadet. This was something else, something he did not understand. The silence in the room was heavy and deep. No one dared to speak or even breathe too loud. Hannah's voice broke the silence. It was not a shout. It was low and steady, but it carried to every corner of the deck. "You confuse survival with savagery, Instructor," she said. Her words were clear and sharp like pieces of ice. "You sit in your clean rooms and you study our past and you call it chaos. You call us wasteful." She held his leg firmly, a living proof of her words. "You call efficiency superior, while you grew up in orbital stations with 0.8 gravity. Your bones are light. Your muscles have never known a real struggle." She looked at him, and then her gaze swept over the other cadets, who were watching with wide, frightened eyes. "My ancestors," she continued, "evolved in a gravity well that would have crushed your lightweight skeletons. They walked on the same ground as animals that could tear them apart with a single swipe. They endured winters that would freeze your core world solid. They survived plagues that would scour your clean, safe colonies to dust." She shifted her weight slightly, and Park grunted in pain, struggling to stay balanced. "You look at our history and you see only war. You do not see the perseverance. You do not see the will to live that burned through all of it. This brutish strength you mock." She glanced at his leg, which she still held effortlessly. "This is the strength that built the first ships that left our world. This wasteful resilience is the only reason humanity survived long enough to be discovered by your core." She leaned forward just a little, and her voice became even more intense. "You think you rescued us. You did not. You just found us. And we have been patient. We have been sitting in your classrooms, learning your rules, waiting for you to see what we have always known." With that, she opened her hand. Instructor Park stumbled back, his leg finally free. He almost fell, catching himself on a nearby console. He was breathing heavily, his uniform messy, his face a mixture of pain, shame, and fear. He did not look like an instructor anymore. He looked like a defeated man. He stared at Hannah, not as a teacher to a student, but as a lesser being looks at a greater one. Hannah turned away from him. She looked at the cadets. She saw their fear, their confusion. Her eyes found Micha, who was trying to hide behind the others, her face pale. "You are taught that you are superior," Hannah said to all of them. "But you are not. You are just later. You are the branches of a tree, but you have forgotten the strength of the roots." She walked slowly toward the center of the room. No one moved to stop her. No one even spoke. "The next time you sit in a lecture hall," she said, her voice dropping, but somehow even more powerful, "and you hear about the legacy of Earth, I want you to remember this moment. Remember the grip that held your instructor's kick. Remember that you are standing here safe and unharmed, because an Earthborn allowed it. Not because you were stronger, not because you were better, but because she chose to let you stand. She stopped and picked up her water bottle from the floor where she had left it. The motion was so normal, so simple after everything that had just happened. It made the whole event feel even more shocking. You are not our saviors. You are our children. And it is time you learned some respect for your parents. She did not look at Park again. She did not look at Micha. She started walking toward the exit of the training deck. Her footsteps were quiet on the floor. Jean, who had been standing frozen the entire time, felt a shock go through his body. He looked at the broken instructor, at the terrified cadets, and then at Hannah's back as she walked away. A feeling burst in his chest. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was pride. A fierce, hot, overwhelming pride. He did not think. He just moved. He stepped out of the line and fell into step beside her, just a half step behind, like a soldier following his captain. Hannah did not acknowledge him with words. She just gave a single, small nod as they walked side by side toward the door. Behind them, the training deck was a tomb of silence. The old story was broken. A new, terrifying, and awesome truth had taken its place. The Earth was not weak. It was not a failure. It was a cradle that had created something unimaginably strong. And they had just been shown a glimpse of what that really meant. The heavy door of the training deck slid shut behind Hannah and Jean, cutting off the silent room. The sound echoed in the empty hallway outside. The light was softer here, and the air felt different. It was like stepping out of a storm into a strange, quiet calm. Jean walked beside Hannah, his heart still pounding in his chest. He looked at her. She was the same person he had sat next to in class for months. The same quiet face, the same calm eyes. But now he saw the truth underneath. He saw the deep, hidden strength, like the solid rock beneath the soil. He did not know what to say. The words felt too small for what had just happened. Finally, he spoke, his voice a little shaky. They all looked so scared. Hannah glanced at him. There was no anger in her face. No pride. Just a quiet acceptance. They were not scared of me, Jean, she said softly. They were scared because the wall they built in their minds just fell down. It is frightening when you find out the world is not what you were told. They walked for a while in silence. The events played over and over in Jin's mind. The scanner, the numbers, the word augmented. The way she stopped the kick without any effort at all. Are there others? He asked quietly. Like you. Hannah nodded slowly. A few. Scattered. Waiting. Our grandparents' generation made a choice. They saw the path the core was leading us down. A path where we would forget who we were. Where we would be ashamed of our own home. So they hid us. They gave us the old gifts, the gifts of Earth, and they told us to be patient. To learn. To wait for the right moment to remind them. Back in the training deck, the silence was beginning to break. Low, nervous whispers started to fill the air. The cadets were looking at each other, their eyes wide. They looked at Instructor Park, who was still leaning against the console, his head down. He was a broken man. His entire belief system, his authority, his pride, had been shattered in front of his students. He had nothing left to teach them. Micha stood frozen in place. The smug, superior look was completely gone from her face. It was replaced by a pale, sickly fear. She kept seeing Hannah's hand catching the kick. She kept hearing the word augmented. All her life, she had been told she was better because she was from the core. Now she knew it was a lie. The person she had mocked was not inferior. She was, in every way that mattered, more. Micha felt small and foolish. One of the cadets, a young man named Tay, slowly walked over to the bioscanner. The screen was still on. The red word, augmented, still glowed. Below it, the incredible numbers were listed. He stared at the bone density reading. 2.18. He tried to imagine what that meant. Bones that were almost unbreakable. He thought of the light gravity of his own home world. He thought of how weak it must seem to her. He turned and looked at the door where Hannah and Jean had left. He wasn't scared anymore. He was in awe. The news did not stay in the training deck. It was too big, too shocking. It moved through the Olympus Mons Orbital Academy like an electric current. It traveled through whispers in the hallways, through frantic messages on datapads, through hushed conversations in the dining hall. "Did you hear? An Earthborn cadet," Scanner said, augmented. She stopped Instructor Park's kick with one hand. The story changed with each telling, growing bigger and more amazing, but at its heart was a simple, undeniable fact. Everything they had been taught about Earth and the people from there was wrong. That evening, Jean sat with Hannah in a quiet corner of the observatory. The stars shone brightly outside the large window. Mars was a red jewel in the darkness. "What happens now?" Jean asked. "To you? They know." Hannah watched the stars. "I do not know," she said honestly. "They may try to punish me. They may try to hide what happened. But they cannot unsee it. The truth is out. A seed has been planted." She turned to him. "Thank you for walking with me." Jean smiled, a real, true smile for the first time all day. "My family is from Busan," he said, "on the old coast. I will always walk with you." Down on the planet below, in the offices of the Academy directors, there was panic and argument. Some called for Hannah's immediate arrest for having forbidden augmentations. Others warned that it was too late for that. The story was everywhere. Arresting her would only make her a hero. The galaxy had been comfortable. It had a neat story about its past. The strong, wise core and the weak saved Earth. It was a simple story that made everyone feel good. That story was over. Now, a new story was beginning. It was a story with a terrifying and powerful question at its heart. If one quiet girl from Earth was this strong, what about the others? What else had the Earth been hiding? And what did it mean for the future of the galaxy? Hannah looked out at the endless stars, her home planet a distant memory behind her. She had not wanted to be a hero or a symbol. She just wanted the truth to be known. They had called her people a stain. She had shown them a glimpse of the fire that had forged humanity. And she knew, deep in her augmented bones, that the fire was only just beginning to spread.